The story opens with a scene of brutal physical and social hierarchy. Maria, alias, is balancing an impossibly heavy ceremonial wine jug on trembling arms while the legendary and merciless Alpha Sean Ra prepares for his orchestrated mating ceremony. The immediate hook is the mystery of the sacred Altar of Sunfire, an ancient relic that consumes in flame anyone impure who dares to desecrate it with a single drop of spilled offering. We are thrust into Maria's world of humiliation as a clumsy servant scorned by the entire Moonshadow Pack. The cathedral trembles with the arrival of Sean Ra's inner circle, warriors in black fur and silver insignias who move like predators circling prey. The atmosphere is established as one of suffocating ritual and deadly tradition, where a single misstep doesn't just mean punishment, it means being declared an abomination before the gods themselves. The air is thick with frankincense and fear. Hundreds of eyes track Maria as she ascends the altar steps, each one silently willing her to fail. Her tattered gray tunic is a stain against the pristine white marble and golden braziers. She can feel the weight of their contempt as heavily as the wine jug cutting into her scarred palms. And then it happens. Her foot catches on the hem of her own dress. Time fragments. The jug tilts. A single ribbon of crimson wine arcs through the incense smoke and lands with a soft, wet sound on the alabaster altar stone. The silence that follows is the silence of held breath before an execution. But instead of screams, there is light. Golden. Blinding. Alive. The flame erupts from the altar not in destruction, but in recognition, coiling around Maria like a lover's embrace, casting her shadow 50 feet tall against the cathedral walls. And for the first time in a century, Alpha Sean Ra's dead, curse-darkened eyes ignite with the same impossible gold, fixing on the trembling girl as if she is the only thing in existence he can truly see. The high priest's voice shatters the shock. Blasphemy. Seize the defiler. But Sean Ra's command cuts deeper. Touch her and burn. Subscribe to see how this unfolds and comment where you're watching from. I will love to say hello. Chapter 1. The Weight of the Jug. Maria's arms had stopped shaking an hour ago. Now they simply burned, a deep, bone-grinding ache that radiated from her shoulders down to her fingertips. The ceremonial wine jug was carved from solid onyx, inlaid with gold that caught the torchlight as she moved. Beautiful, ancient, and heavy enough to break a grown warrior's grip. They'd given it to her anyway. Careful, clumsy, someone hissed from the crowd as she passed. Laughter rippled through the corridor like poison in water. Maria kept her eyes down, focused on the uneven stone floor beneath her worn boots. One foot in front of the other. Don't trip. Don't stumble. Don't give them another reason to remind you that you don't belong here. The Moonshadow Pack cathedral loomed ahead, its massive doors thrown open to reveal a sea of bodies dressed in ceremonial furs and silver jewelry. The Alpha's mating ceremony, though everyone whispered it was fake, a political arrangement with Lady Selene of the Northern Reaches, was the event of the decade. Every wolf of status had come to witness Sean Ra, the unconquered Alpha, finally take a mate. Maria was here to serve, to be invisible, to pour the sacred wine and disappear before anyone remembered her name. Move faster, half-breed. The head steward's cane cracked against the wall beside her head. Maria flinched, nearly losing her grip on the jug. Her heart hammered as she quickened her pace, the wine sloshing dangerously inside its vessel. Half-breed. Clumsy. Cursed. The names had followed her since childhood, when her wolf had never come and her mother had died giving birth to something the pack called incomplete. Maria had survived by making herself small, by accepting every cruel task and degrading chore without complaint. Invisibility was safety. But today, invisibility was impossible. The cathedral swallowed her whole as she stepped inside. Vaulted ceilings disappeared into shadow. Braziers of golden flame lined the walls, casting dancing light across hundreds of faces that turned to watch her ascent toward the altar. The sacred altar of Sunfire sat at the cathedral's heart, white marble veined with gold, topped with an eternal flame that had burned for 1,000 years. Legend said the flame knew truth from lies, purity from corruption, that it would consume anyone unworthy who dared defile its presence. Maria's palms were slick with sweat against the jug. At the altar's base stood Alpha Sean Ra. Even from a distance, he was overwhelming, a mountain of a man draped in black fur that seemed to absorb light. His dark hair fell past his shoulders, partially obscuring a face carved from granite and shadow. But it was his eyes that made Maria's breath catch. Empty, colorless, like looking into the eyes of a corpse that refused to die. The curse, people whispered. The price he'd paid for his power. Beside him stood Lady Selene, resplendent in white silk and silver thread, her perfect face arranged in a victorious smile. She looked at Maria the way one might look at a beetle, something to be crushed beneath a heel if it crawled too close. "The offering wine," the high priest intoned, his voice echoing off stone. "Let the servant approach." Servant, not even her name. Maria forced her trembling legs to climb the altar steps. Each one felt like a mountain. The weight of the jug dragged at her shoulders. The weight of their stairs pressed against her spine. Don't trip. Don't fall. Don't. Her worn boot caught on a raised edge of marble. Time fractured. Chapter 2, The Golden Ignition. The world tilted. Maria's body lurched forward, arms windmilling desperately to catch her balance. The jug slipped. For one crystallized moment, she could see it happening in slow motion. The ancient vessel tipping, the dark red wine beginning its inevitable arc through the smoke-thick air. Her knee cracked against the marble step. Pain exploded through her leg, but worse was the sound. The wet, terrible splash of sacred wine hitting the pristine white altar. The silence was absolute. Maria's breath came in ragged gasps as she stared at the spreading crimson stain. Her scraped palms leaked blood onto the marble, mixing with the spilled offering. She couldn't move, couldn't think, could only wait for the fury to descend. But the fury never came. Instead, a light. It started as a spark where wine and blood met stone. Then it spread, racing along the altar's golden veins like wildfire through dry timber. The eternal flame, which had burned steady and contained for a millennium, suddenly erupted skyward in a pillar of molten gold. Screams echoed through the cathedral, but Maria couldn't hear them. The flame wasn't burning her. It was reaching for her, tendrils of living light coiling around her arms, her waist, lifting her gently to her feet. The pain in her knee vanished. The exhaustion in her muscles melted away. She stood transfixed as the golden fire danced across her skin without scorching, without consuming. It felt like coming home. "Impossible," someone breathed. Maria's gaze snapped up and locked with Alpha Sean Ross. His eyes were no longer dead and colorless. They blazed with the same golden fire that surrounded her, bright and feral and utterly, devastatingly alive. He stared at her as though she were the only thing in existence, his massive frame rigid with something that looked like recognition. Like hunger. The air between them crackled with heat that had nothing to do with flame. Sean took a step toward her, one hand outstretched, and Maria saw his fingers trembling. The unconquered Alpha, the merciless warrior who'd never bent knee to anyone, looked at her with something close to desperation. "You," he rasped, his voice like gravel and smoke. "I can see you." Whatever spell held the crowd broke. Blasphemy. The high priest's shriek cut through the chaos. He thrust a gnarled finger at Maria, his face twisted with rage. "She has defiled the sacred altar. She has corrupted the holy flame with her impure blood." The golden light flickered uncertainly around Maria as doubt crept in. Defiled. Corrupted. Impure. The same words they'd used her entire life. Lady Selene's voice joined the priest's, cold and sharp as winter wind. The law is clear. Death by fire for any who desecrate the altar of Sunfire. Unless, her smile was razor-thin, unless the Alpha wishes to show mercy to his servant. It was a trap. Maria could see it in Celine's calculating eyes. If Sean showed mercy, he'd appear weak. If he condemned her, he'd kill whatever connection the flame had forged between them. The warriors in black fur began to close in, silver chains rattling in their hands. But Sean Raw didn't move. His golden eyes remained fixed on Maria, searching her face with an intensity that made her knees weak for an entirely different reason. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute command. Touch her and burn. Chapter 3, Blasphemy or Blessing. The high priest's face purpled with fury. Alpha Ra, you cannot mean to protect this creature. She has violated every sacred law. The flame itself cries out for justice. Does it? Sean's voice was dangerously soft. He gestured to the golden fire, still wreathed around Maria like a living cloak. Because from where I stand, the flame seems quite content. Murmurs rippled through the assembled crowd. Maria could feel their eyes on her, feel the weight of their judgment and confusion. The golden light pulsed in response to her racing heartbeat, growing brighter, then dimming, then brightening again as if it were breathing in sync with her. Lady Celine moved to stand beside the high priest, her silk gown whispering across marble. Perhaps the Alpha has been enchanted, bewitched by whatever dark magic this half-breed possesses. Her words dripped false concern. We should separate them, for his own protection. I am not bewitched, Sean growled. The temperature in the cathedral seemed to drop 10 degrees. And if you question my judgment again, Celine, you'll find yourself without a tongue to speak such slander. Maria's chest tightened. He was defending her. The Alpha was defending her in front of the entire pack, in front of the woman who was supposed to become his mate this very day. It was insane. It was dangerous. It was dooming them both. Alpha, Maria whispered, finding her voice for the first time since the wine had spilled. Please, I don't understand what's happening, but I don't want to cause you trouble. Let them take me. I'll accept whatever punishment. No. The single word was absolute. Sean finally looked away from her to sweep his burning gaze across the crowd. I've been cursed for 3 years, blind to everything except shadows and shapes. The healers said nothing could restore my sight. He paused, letting the revelation sink in. But when this woman's blood touched the altar, when the flame ignited, I could see again. For the first time in 1,000 days, I can see. Gasps echoed through the cathedral. Even Lady Celine looked shaken, her perfect composure cracking. The high priest, however, remained unmoved. All the more reason to suspect dark magic. This could be a trick, a deception. Then test her. The voice came from the shadows near the altar. An ancient woman stepped forward, leaning heavily on a staff carved with wolf heads. Elder Rhiannon, the oldest living member of the pack. Her milky eyes somehow seemed to pierce right through Maria. The Altar of Sunfire has one purpose, to reveal truth. If she is truly corrupt, truly a blasphemer, the flame will consume her when she touches it again. Maria's blood turned to ice. And if she survives? Sean demanded. Elder Rhiannon's wrinkled face split into a knowing smile. Then perhaps the gods have been trying to tell us something, and we've been too blind to listen. Even those of us with eyes that still work. She thumped her staff against the floor. I call for the trial of Sunfire. 3 days hence, the girl will face the altar once more. Let the flame judge her worth. The high priest opened his mouth to protest, but Elder Rhiannon silenced him with a look. She might be old, but her authority was undeniable. Until then, the elder continued, the girl will be held in the cathedral dungeons. No harm is to come to her. She is under the protection of the sacred trial. Anyone who violates this sanctuary answers to me. Another thump of her staff. Is that clear? The warriors with chains hesitated, looking between the elder and their alpha. Sean's jaw clenched, every muscle in his massive frame coiled with barely restrained violence. Maria could see the war raging behind his golden eyes. The alpha who wanted to simply take what was his versus the leader who knew he couldn't shatter every tradition without destroying his authority. Finally, he gave a curt nod. The golden flame around Maria guttered and died, returning to its normal state atop the altar. The moment the light vanished, Maria's legs nearly buckled. She felt hollow cold, as if something vital had been torn away. The warriors moved in with their chains. As silver manacles closed around her wrists, burning her skin where they touched, Maria looked back at Sean Raw. He stood rigid as stone, his hands clenched into fists, the golden light fading from his eyes until only darkness remained. But just before the guards dragged her toward the dungeon entrance, she heard his voice, so quiet only she could hear. 3 days. Hold on for 3 days. It sounded like both a promise and a prayer. Chapter 4. The Dungeon Visit. The dungeon carved into the cathedral's foundation was a place designed to break spirits. No windows. No light save for the occasional guttering torch mounted too high to reach. The cold seeped up through the stone floor and settled into Maria's bones, making her shiver despite the thin blanket they'd thrown into her cell. The silver manacles had been removed. They'd burned her wrists raw within the first hour, but the collar remained. Silver-laced leather that pressed against her throat like a constant threat. Maria sat with her back against the damp wall, knees drawn to her chest, and tried not to think about what would happen in 3 days. The trial of Sunfire. If the flame rejected her, she'd burn alive in front of everyone. If it accepted her, what then? She'd seen the hatred in Lady Celine's eyes, the fear and disgust in the high priest's face. Even if the flame proved her innocent, half the pack would never accept her. And Sean Raw, what did he see when he looked at her? What did he want? The memory of his golden eyes burned in her mind. I can see you. What did that even mean? Footsteps echoed down the corridor. Maria tensed, but she didn't move. Probably just another guard coming to throw stale bread and water through the cell bars. They'd been instructed not to speak to her, not to acknowledge her existence beyond keeping her barely alive. But these footsteps were different. Heavy, deliberate, and there were no accompanying voices, no casual conversation between guards. A massive shadow materialized outside her cell. Maria scrambled to her feet, her heart lodging in her throat. Alpha Sean Raw stood in the torchlight, still wearing his ceremonial furs. His dark hair was disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it repeatedly. And his eyes, even in the dimness, she could see they were no longer golden. Just empty darkness once more. He shouldn't be here. The elder had said no harm could come to her during the trial period, but that didn't mean the Alpha himself could visit. If anyone found out, I paid the guards to disappear for an hour. His voice was rough, like he hadn't used it in hours. Maybe he hadn't. I needed to. He trailed off, one hand reaching out to grip the cell bars. The metal groaned under his strength. To what? Maria whispered. To see if it was real. Sean's gaze dragged over her, desperate and hungry. Without the flame, I can barely make out your shape. Just shadows. But when I'm close enough. He inhaled deeply, and Maria realized with a start that he was scenting her. When I'm close enough, I can feel you. Like standing next to a bonfire. Maria's breath caught. The cold that had settled into her bones was suddenly gone, replaced by a heat that seemed to radiate from her core outward. The air between them thickened, became electric. I don't understand any of this, she admitted. I'm nobody. I'm nothing. Why would the flame? Why would you? You're not nothing. The words came out almost angry. Sean reached up and wrenched the cell door open with his bare hands, the lock shattering like pottery. He stepped inside, and the already small space became impossibly smaller. I don't know what you are, but you're not nothing. He was so close now that Maria had to tilt her head back to look at him. Even without seeing clearly, he'd crossed the distance between them with absolute certainty. Now his hand came up slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. His rough palm cupped her cheek, thumb brushing over her cheekbone with unexpected gentleness. The moment he touched her, Maria felt something snap into place, like a lock turning, a door opening, a wall crumbling. Sean inhaled sharply. "There. I can see you." His voice was wonder and agony mixed together. "Just you. Nothing else. Only you." "The curse," Maria breathed. "It's still there. Everywhere except where you are." His other hand came up to frame her face, holding her as if she were something precious and breakable. "You're the only light in my darkness. Do you understand? For 3 years I've lived in shadow. And then you spilled wine on an altar, and for one perfect moment, the world came back." Tears burned in Maria's eyes. "I didn't mean to. I know." His forehead dropped to rest against hers, his breath warm on her lips. "I know you didn't. But fate doesn't ask permission. The flame recognized something in you. Something that's been sleeping. The high priest thinks I'm corrupt. Cursed. The high priest is a fool." Sean's hands trembled against her skin. "I can feel what you are. My wolf knows. It's been howling inside me since the moment that flame touched you, demanding I claim what's mine. Mine." The word should have terrified her. Instead, it sent heat pooling in her stomach. "You're supposed to mate Lady Selene," Maria reminded him, though her voice came out breathless. "A political arrangement. Meaningless." His thumb stroked her cheekbones. "I've never wanted anyone. Never felt the pull. Healers said it was the curse, that it had killed my ability to bond. But now I think it was just waiting. For you. I could die in 3 days. You won't." The certainty in his voice was absolute. "Whatever the flame saw in you, it's real. It's true. You'll survive the trial, and then—" He paused, and she felt the tension coiled in his massive frame. "Then I'll have to figure out how to keep a pack from tearing itself apart over a servant girl their alpha can't live without." Before Maria could respond, Sean pulled back slightly. His empty eyes searched the darkness where her face was. "Tell me to leave. Tell me you don't feel this, and I'll walk away. I'll protect you from a distance, make sure the trial is fair, but I won't." He didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Maria's heart was a wild thing in her chest. Every logical part of her brain screamed that this was impossible, dangerous, that she should absolutely tell him to leave. But the rest of her, the part that had lit up like a star when the golden flame touched her, the part that felt warm and alive for the first time in her miserable existence, that part couldn't form the words. Instead, she leaned up on her toes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was soft, tentative, asking a question she didn't have words for. Sean's answer was to pull her hard against him, deepening the kiss with a desperation that stole her breath. His arms came around her like steel bands, and Maria felt the rumble of a growl building in his chest, primal and possessive and entirely inhuman. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Sean rested his forehead against hers again. 3 days, he murmured. "Survive 3 days, little flame. Then I'll burn the world before I let anyone take you from me." He kissed her once more, soft and reverent, then forced himself to pull away. The loss of his warmth left Maria aching. "Sean," she called as he reached the cell door. He paused, his hand on the broken frame. "What if the flame rejects me? What if I'm not, whatever you think I am?" In the torchlight, she saw him smile, sharp and dangerous. "Then I'll declare war on the gods themselves." He disappeared into the corridor, leaving Maria standing in the darkness. But for the first time since she'd been thrown into this cell, she didn't feel cold. She felt like a flame waiting to ignite. Chapter 5: The Rival's Venom. Lady Selene stood before the gilded mirror in her chambers, her reflection perfect as always. Porcelain skin, hair like spun silver. A face that had launched political alliances and ended blood feuds. She was everything a Luna should be, born of noble blood, trained in diplomacy and warfare, desired by every unmated wolf in 3 territories. And yet, a clumsy half-breed servant had stolen her alpha's attention with nothing but spilled wine and dumb luck. Unacceptable, she whispered to her reflection. Behind her, her handmaiden Vera shifted nervously. My lady, perhaps we should wait. The trial is in 2 days. If the flame rejects her. And if it doesn't, Selene whirled, her silk robe billowing. What then, Vera? Do I stand aside while that thing takes everything I've worked for? Everything my family negotiated. This mating ceremony was supposed to cement the alliance between the Moonshadow Pack and the Northern Reaches. It was supposed to make Selene the most powerful Luna in living memory. But now Sean Raw looked at her with barely concealed disdain, while his eyes came alive for a girl who couldn't even carry a wine jug without tripping. It was an insult, a humiliation. It had to be corrected. Selene moved to her writing desk and withdrew a small glass vial from a hidden compartment. The liquid inside was clear as water, odorless, tasteless. Moonsbane extract, a poison that caused agonizing stomach cramps and fever but left no trace after death. The victim simply appeared to have fallen ill. My lady, Vera breathed, horror in her voice. You can't mean to. I mean to protect what's mine. Selene tucked the vial into her sleeve. The girl is being held in the dungeons. The guards change shifts at midnight. The new ones won't arrive for at least 10 minutes. Plenty of time for me to deliver her evening meal personally. A lady showing mercy to the accused. How charitable. But Elder Rhiannon said the girl was under trial protection. Elder Rhiannon is old and sentimental. Selene's smile was ice cold. By the time anyone realizes what's happened, it will be too late. The girl will be dead, and I will weep so prettily at the tragedy. Perhaps even suggest that the strain of lying about her divine connection to the altar caused her heart to give out. Vera wrung her hands. And if the Alpha suspects? For the first time, doubt flickered across Selene's face. Sean Raw was many things, brutal, merciless, cunning, but he wasn't stupid. If he suspected foul play, his rage would be apocalyptic. But he was also blind. Without that golden flame, he couldn't see clearly. And grief made everyone foolish. He'll suspect, Selene admitted, but he won't be able to prove anything. And eventually, he'll accept that some things aren't meant to be. Then he'll do his duty and complete our mating ceremony. Because that's what alphas do, they put the pack first. She swept toward the door, the vial a cold weight against her wrist. Stay here, Vera. And if anyone asks, I was in my chambers all night, praying for the gods to show us truth. The dungeon was quieter than death itself. Maria sat on the stone floor, trying to conserve body heat and failing miserably. Her wrists still bore angry red welts from the silver manacles. The kiss she'd shared with Sean felt like a dream now, something too good, too impossible to be real. 3 days. Survived 3 days. Footsteps echoed down the corridor. Maria tensed, then relaxed when she saw it wasn't a guard. Lady Selene emerged from the shadows, carrying a covered tray. She was dressed simply, for her at least, in a dove-gray gown with minimal jewelry. She looked like a saint come to offer comfort to the condemned. Maria, isn't it? Selene's voice was honey-sweet as she approached the cell. Or do you prefer alias? Maria rose slowly, every instinct screaming danger. Lady Selene, you shouldn't be here. I know, but I couldn't sleep, thinking of you down here in the cold. Selene set the tray on the ground and pushed it through the gap beneath the cell bars. I brought you proper food. The guards said they've been feeding you nothing but bread and water. That's no way to prepare for a trial. Maria stared at the tray. Roasted meat, fresh bread, even a small cup of wine. Her stomach cramped with hunger, She hadn't eaten anything substantial in 2 days. But something was wrong. Why? Maria asked quietly. Why would you help me? I ruined your mating ceremony. Celine's perfect smile never wavered. You didn't ruin anything. If the flame truly chose you, then perhaps the gods have different plans for all of us. I'm not so proud that I'd stand in the way of divine will. She gestured to the food. Please eat. You'll need your strength. Maria didn't move. Celine's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. You don't trust me. Should I? For a moment, the mask slipped. Celine's eyes went cold as winter ice, her expression twisting into something ugly. Then, just as quickly, the saint returned. You're smarter than you look, Celine murmured. She reached down and picked up the cup of wine, taking a delicate sip. See, not poisoned. I know what you must think of me, but I'm not a monster. She set the cup back down. I simply came to make peace before the trial. What you choose to do with that is your own decision. She turned and walked away, her footsteps fading into silence. Maria stared at the tray for a long moment. Her stomach twisted with hunger. The meat smelled incredible, and Celine had drunk from the wine herself. Surely that meant it was safe? But Maria hadn't survived this long by being careless. She pushed the tray away and returned to her corner, wrapping the thin blanket around her shoulders. 2 more days. She could last 2 more days. In the corridor beyond, hidden in shadow, Celine stood with her fists clenched. The stupid girl hadn't taken the bait. The poison remained in the wine. Celine had only pretended to drink, tipping the cup to her lips without swallowing. She'd underestimated the half-breed's survival instincts. No matter. There were other ways. Celine's hand moved to another vial hidden in her bodice. This one filled with silver powder ground so fine it could pass through the smallest cracks. Tomorrow, she'd bribe one of the junior priests. By the time the trial began, the sacred altar would be coated in a poison specifically designed to burn anyone who touched it, divine connection or not. The girl would burn, and Sean Raw would be hers once more. Chapter 6. The Alpha's Hesitation. The Alpha's war room was silent save for the crackling fire in the massive stone hearth. Sean Raw stood before a table covered in maps and reports, his hands braced against the wood, his shoulders rigid with tension. He'd been standing there for 3 hours. Around the table sat his council of elders, 6 of the most powerful wolves in the Moonshadow Pack. Elder Rhiannon, Elder Garrett, Master of the Warriors, Elder Thorn, Keeper of Pack Law, Elder Morgana, Overseer of Territories, Elder Silas, Commander of the Scouts, and Elder Caspian, the High Priest's brother and voice of religious tradition. All of them watched their alpha with varying degrees of concern and calculation. The trial is tomorrow, Elder Thorn said finally, breaking the silence. The pack is restless. They're divided. Some see the girl as a miracle. Others see her as an abomination. And you? Sean's voice was dangerously quiet. What do you see, Thorn? The old wolf shifted uncomfortably. I see an opportunity for chaos. If she survives the trial, you'll have a servant girl as Luna. The noble families will revolt. If she dies, you'll be compromised. Your curse will return in full force. My curse is my own burden, but it affects the pack. Elder Caspian slammed his palm on the table. An alpha who cannot see is an alpha who cannot lead. You've managed these 3 years through sheer force of will and your enhanced senses, but we all know you've been suffering. If this girl is truly your cure, then perhaps she should be kept alive. But as a healer, not a mate. Sean's hands tightened on the table, his knuckles going white. She's not a tool to be used. Then what is she? Elder Garrett demanded. Your mate? Based on 1 moment of golden flame and your wolf's instincts? You barely know her name. I know enough. You know nothing. Caspian stood, his face red with fury. She could be a witch, a demon sent to corrupt you. The flame could be a trick. The table splintered beneath Sean's hands, wood exploding into shards. The elders fell silent instantly. When Sean spoke again, his voice was arctic cold. My wolf has never been wrong. Not once in 30 years. When it tells me to hunt, there is prey. When it tells me to fight, there is a threat. And when it tells me to claim. He lifted his head, his empty eyes somehow piercing each elder in turn. It's telling me that girl is mine. That she's been mine since before either of us was born. You can question many things about me, but don't question my wolf. Elder Rhiannon's dry chuckle broke the tension. Fate is rarely convenient, is it, Alpha? She leaned forward on her staff. I've lived long enough to see 3 alphas rise and fall. Each one thought they could control their destiny, bend the pack to their will. Each one learned that some things are simply meant to be. Her milky eyes fixed on Sean. But I've also seen alphas torn between heart and duty. Which will you choose? Why must I choose? Sean's voice carried an edge of desperation he rarely let show. Why can't I have both? Because the pack won't accept her, Elder Morgana said gently. She was the youngest of the elders, barely 50, and the closest thing Sean had to an ally on the council. Not as Luna. A servant girl with no wolf, no family, no training? They'll see it as an insult to centuries of tradition. Then traditions need to change. That's easy to say when you're not the one who will bleed for it. Elder Garrett's voice was hard. You want to crown this girl? Fine. But be prepared for rebellion. The northern reaches will withdraw their alliance. Lady Celine's father has already sent 3 messengers demanding an explanation. The eastern packs will see it as weakness. And within our own borders, you'll have wolves who've served faithfully for decades wondering why they should follow an alpha who abandons political strategy for. What? A pretty face? A magical flame? Sean's wolf snarled inside him, demanding he shift and tear these doubters apart. But the man, the alpha who'd clawed his way to power through strategy and sacrifice, knew they were right. Crowning Maria would be declaring war on tradition itself. But letting her go would be cutting out his own heart. There's another option, Elder Thorne said carefully. Execute her yourself. The temperature in the room plummeted. You're suggesting I murder my own mate. Sean's words were barely above a whisper, but they carried the promise of violence. I'm suggesting you prove your loyalty to pack law above all else. Thorne stood his ground despite the alpha's fury. The girl broke sacred tradition. She spilled offering wine on the altar of Sunfire. The punishment has always been death. If you execute her personally, you show the pack that you value law and order over personal desire. You become stronger, not weaker. The curse. He hesitated. The curse will be painful, yes. But you survived it before. You'll survive it again. And if I refuse, then you risk civil war. Elder Caspian's voice was blunt. The old families are already meeting in secret, Alpha. They're discussing whether you're fit to lead if you can be so easily swayed by a half-breed servant. If you choose her over the pack's stability, they will challenge you. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. And blood will run. Sean turned away from them all, staring into the fire. In the dancing flames, he could almost see her, golden light and wide, terrified eyes. Maria, alias, his little flame. Survive 3 days, little flame. Then I'll burn the world before I let anyone take you from me. A promise, one he'd meant with every fiber of his being. But what if burning the world meant destroying the very pack he'd sworn to protect? The trial is tomorrow, Elder Rhiannon said softly. Sleep on it, Alpha. See what the flame reveals. Then make your choice. The elders filed out one by one, until only Sean remained in the war room. He stood before the fire until dawn broke, his wolf howling inside him, his duty pressing down like chains. And for the first time in his life, Sean Raw didn't know if he was strong enough to do what needed to be done. Chapter 7. The Trial of Sunfire. The cathedral was packed beyond capacity. Wolves from every corner of the territory had come to witness the trial of Sunfire, some hoping for a miracle, others hungry for blood. The air crackled with tension and the heavy scent of anticipation. Maria stood in a small antechamber off the main hall, flanked by two silent guards. They'd given her clean clothes, a simple white shift that made her look like either a bride or a sacrifice. She suspected it was meant to be the latter. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. If the flame accepts her, she's Luna. If it rejects her, she burns. Through the stone walls, she could hear the crowds murmuring. Hundreds of voices, all discussing her fate as if she were already dead. Maybe she was. The door opened. Elder Rhiannon entered, leaning heavily on her staff. "It's time, child." Maria swallowed hard. "Elder, I have to ask, what if I'm not what everyone thinks? What if the flame was just a mistake? A fluke?" The old woman studied her with those milky, all-seeing eyes. "Do you know what the Altar of Sunfire really is?" Maria shook her head. "It's a relic from the First Age, when wolves still walked with the sun goddess herself. The flame doesn't judge worthiness or purity, it recognizes bloodlines. Specifically, it recognizes the blood of the sun priestesses." Rhiannon smiled. Priestesses who were said to have disappeared 1,000 years ago, their line extinct. Maria's breath caught. "You think I think you're about to prove that the impossible is simply the forgotten, waiting to be remembered." Rhiannon tapped her staff against the floor. "Now come. Your fate awaits." The guards opened the double doors. The cathedral erupted with noise as Maria entered. Jeers and cheers mixed together into a wall of sound that made her ears ring. She forced herself to walk forward, head held high despite her terror. The sacred altar of Sunfire stood at the center of the cathedral, surrounded by a ring of silver chains. The eternal flame burned steady and golden atop the marble. Waiting, Alpha Sean Raw stood to the left of the altar, his massive frame rigid in ceremonial black. His eyes were empty and dark once more, but Maria saw the tension in his clenched jaw, the white-knuckle grip of his hands. Lady Celine stood on the opposite side, beautiful and serene in pale blue silk. She caught Maria's eye and smiled, sweet as poison. The high priest raised his arms, and silence fell. "We are gathered to witness the trial of Sunfire." His voice boomed through the cathedral. "Maria, called Alias, has been accused of defiling the sacred altar. Today, the flame itself will judge her truth." He gestured to the altar. "If she is pure, the flame will embrace her. If she is corrupt," he paused dramatically, "she will burn until nothing remains but ash." Maria's legs felt like water as the guards led her forward. The silver chains were removed, leaving her standing alone before the altar. The flame seemed to pulse, as if breathing. "Place your hands upon the altar stone," the high priest commanded. "Let the gods reveal what you truly are." Maria looked at Sean one last time. His face was carved from stone, unreadable, but his hands trembled at his sides. She turned back to the altar, drew a deep breath, and pressed both palms flat against the cold marble. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the flame exploded. Golden light erupted from the altar in a blinding column that reached the cathedral ceiling. Heat washed over the crowd, but it wasn't burning. It was warm and alive and welcoming. The light spread across the floor in veins of molten gold, racing along ancient grooves carved into the stone that no one had noticed in centuries. Maria gasped as power flooded through her. Not painful, but overwhelming, like every cell in her body was waking up after a lifetime of sleep. Her vision sharpened. Her senses expanded. She could feel the heartbeat of every wolf in the cathedral, could smell their fear and awe and rage. And at the center of it all, she felt Sean, his heartbeat syncing with hers, his wolf reaching for hers with desperate hunger. There, something whispered in her mind. He's there. Impossible. The high priest stumbled backward, shielding his eyes from the light. This can't be. She has no wolf. No noble blood. This must be witchcraft. But Elder Rhiannon was laughing, a delighted cackle that cut through the chaos. Look at the altar. The markings. Maria tore her gaze from the flame to look down. The white marble was covered in golden script, glowing words in a language dead for centuries. And as Maria watched, a symbol burned itself into being directly beneath her hands. A sun surrounded by 12 rays, each tipped with a wolf's head. The mark of the Sun Priestess. She's one of them, Rhiannon breathed, wonder in her voice. The lost line. The goddess is chosen. After 1,000 years. She turned to the stunned crowd. The Sunfire has spoken. Maria is not just pure, she is divine. The crowd exploded into chaos. Some wolves dropped to their knees in reverence. Others shouted accusations of deception. Arguments broke out, pushing and shoving spreading through the cathedral. But Maria only had eyes for Sean. He stood frozen, and she watched as golden light bloomed in his eyes once more. Watched as he truly saw her for the second time. His expression transformed from shock to hunger to something that looked almost like pain. Then Lady Selene screamed. No, this is wrong. She's bewitched the altar itself. Selene's perfect composure shattered. She pushed through the crowd, her face twisted with fury. I won't let some half-breed servant steal everything I'm owed. She lunged toward the altar, a silver dagger flashing in her hand, aimed straight for Maria's heart. Chapter 8. The Shadow Sabotage. Time fractured into crystalline shards. Maria saw the blade coming, silver etched with dark runes that seemed to drink the light. She tried to move, but her hands were still pressed to the altar, the golden flame holding her in place like a fly in amber. Lady Selene's face was a mask of beautiful rage, her perfect features distorted by pure hatred. If I can't have him, no one will. The dagger descended, but it never reached Maria's heart. A massive shape crashed into Selene from the side, sending her sprawling across the marble. The dagger skittered away, clattering against stone. Guards rushed forward, but froze when they saw who had intervened. Alpha Sean Raw stood over Selene's fallen form, his body trembling with barely restrained violence. His empty eyes somehow found hers with perfect accuracy. You dare, he growled, his voice more animal than man. You dare attack her in the sacred trial? Selene scrambled backward, genuine fear flickering across her face for the first time. Alpha, she's poisoned your mind. Can't you see? This isn't natural. The flame, your curse, all of it, it's her doing. Seize Lady Selene, Elder Rhiannon commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. She has violated the sanctity of the trial. She will be held for judgment. Guards moved to obey, hauling Selene to her feet. She struggled, her composure completely shattered now. You're all fools. That girl is a curse, not a blessing. She'll destroy everything. As the guards dragged her away, something caught Maria's eye. Where Selene had stood moments before, there was a faint shimmer on the altar's surface, like oil on water, but wrong. Maria's enhanced senses picked up the acrid scent of silver. Wait, Maria called out, her voice stronger than she'd ever heard it. The golden flame pulsed in response to her words, and to her shock, everyone in the cathedral fell silent. There's something on the altar. Something that shouldn't be there. Elder Rhiannon moved forward, her ancient eyes narrowing. She reached out with one gnarled finger and touched the shimmering substance, then brought it to her nose. Her expression darkened. Silver powder. Ground so fine it's almost invisible. She turned to face Selene, who had gone deathly pale. You poisoned the altar. You tried to ensure the girl would burn regardless of her worthiness. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. I don't know what you're talking about. Selene's protest sounded hollow, even to her own ears. Anyone could have. Search her chambers, Sean commanded, his voice like thunder. Now. 2 guards broke away at a run. The cathedral had fallen into shocked silence, hundreds of eyes fixed on the unfolding drama. The high priest pushed through the crowd, his face ashen. If the altar was compromised, then the trial is invalid. We must cleanse it and begin again. No. Maria's voice rang out clear and certain. The golden flame around her surged higher, responding to her will. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel small or clumsy or worthless. She felt like what she was meant to be. The altar recognized me before it was poisoned. The flame accepted me the moment I touched it. The silver powder only appeared when Lady Selene approached. I can smell it on her hands, on her dress. Selene's mouth opened and closed, no words coming out. Strip her of her titles, Elder Rhiannon declared. Exile her from Moonshadow territory. She has not only violated trial sanctity, she has attempted murder in the goddess's own temple. No! Selene's shriek was primal. She wrenched free from the guards, her eyes wild. You can't do this to me. I am the daughter of the Northern Reaches Alpha. This is an act of war. Then let there be war. Sean's words were final. He turned his back on Selene dismissively, his attention entirely on Maria. Because I will not tolerate anyone who tries to harm what's mine. The guards dragged Selene away, her screams echoing through the cathedral until the heavy doors slammed shut behind her. In the ringing silence that followed, Elder Rhiannon thumped her staff against the floor. The trial has concluded. The sacred altar of Sunfire has chosen. Maria, blood of the lost sun priestesses, is hereby recognized as Luna of the Moonshadow Pack. Some wolves dropped to their knees immediately. Others looked uncertain, conflicted. A few, mostly older nobles, wore expressions of barely concealed fury. But none dared challenge the elder's declaration. Not with the golden flame still blazing around Maria like a crown. Maria finally pulled her hands from the altar. The moment she did, the flame returned to its normal size, though it burned brighter than it had in centuries. The golden script on the marble remained, glowing softly. She turned to face Sean, suddenly aware that she was standing in a thin white shift in front of hundreds of wolves, that she'd just been declared Luna despite being nobody, nothing, a servant girl who couldn't even carry a wine jug without tripping. Except she wasn't nothing anymore. The power still hummed beneath her skin, warm and right and undeniable. Sean moved toward her with predatory grace, his empty eyes fixed on her as if she were the only star in his darkness. When he reached her, he shrugged off his massive black fur cloak and draped it around her shoulders. The fur was still warm from his body heat. It smelled like pine and smoke and something wild. It swallowed her whole, but the weight of it felt like protection, like claiming. Mine, Sean murmured, so quietly only she could hear. His hand came up to cup her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone. Say you're mine. Maria's breath caught. Around them, hundreds of wolves watched, judging, waiting. She could feel the weight of their expectations, their doubts, their anger. But when she looked into Sean's face, even without seeing her clearly, the raw need and wonder in his expression, none of that mattered. Yours, she whispered back. The golden light in his eyes blazed brighter. Then Alpha Sean Raw claimed his Luna's mouth in a kiss that left no doubt about his intentions. The crowd erupted, some cheering, some gasping in shock at the public display. Maria didn't care. She rose on her toes, her hands fisting in his leather armor, and kissed him back with everything she had. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Sean turned to address the crowd. His voice carried the absolute authority of an alpha who would not be challenged. This is your Luna. Anyone who questions her worth questions me. Anyone who harms her declares war on this pack. His gaze swept across the assembled wolves, predator assessing prey. Is that understood? The response wasn't unanimous, but it was loud enough. Yes, Alpha. Chapter 9, The Golden Protector. The feast hall had been hastily converted for an impromptu Luna ceremony. Long tables groaned under the weight of roasted meats, fresh bread, and barrels of wine. Torches blazed in iron sconces, casting dancing shadows across stone walls. But the celebration felt more like a wake. Maria sat at the high table beside Sean, drowning in his fur cloak, painfully aware of every eye tracking her movements. The wolves who'd knelt in the cathedral now sat in rigid silence, their loyalty bought by divine fire, but not yet earned through trust. The nobles clustered together, whispering behind jeweled goblets. She was Luna in name, but not yet in their hearts. "Eat," Sean murmured beside her. His hand rested on her thigh beneath the table, a possessive weight that sent heat pooling in her stomach. "You need your strength." Maria picked at the roasted venison on her plate, her appetite long gone. "They hate me. They fear you. There's a difference." His thumb traced circles on her leg through the thin shift. "Fear can become respect. Hatred is harder to change. And which do you think they feel?" Sean was quiet for a moment. "Both. You've upended their entire world in 3 days. Give them time. Time. As if they had any." Maria had seen the messengers arriving throughout the afternoon. Riders from the northern reaches demanding an explanation for Celine's exile, scouts reporting unrest in the outer territories, merchants worried about trade agreements falling apart. Sean's decision to crown a servant Luna was already fracturing the careful political balance he'd maintained for years. All because of her. "Alpha." Elder Thorne approached the high table, his expression grave. "We need to discuss the Northern Reaches situation. Alpha Cornelius has sent word that he considers Celine's exile an act of aggression. He's demanding either her return or compensation." "Compensation." Sean's voice was flat. "What does he want?" "Territory. The Whispering Woods and the eastern hunting grounds." Thorne's jaw tightened. "Or he threatens war." Maria's stomach dropped. The Whispering Woods were some of the most valuable territory in Moonshadow, rich with game, protected water sources, strategic position. Giving them up would weaken the pack significantly. "Tell Cornelius," Sean said slowly, dangerously, "that his daughter tried to murder my Luna in a sacred trial, that she poisoned the altar of Sunfire itself, and that if he wants war over her exile, I will personally deliver his daughter's head on a pike before I burn the northern reaches to ash." Thorne's face went pale. "Alpha, that's a promise." Sean's golden eyes blazed. "Not a threat. Now leave us." The elder retreated quickly. Around the feast hall, conversations had died. Everyone had heard the exchange. Maria turned to Sean, keeping her voice low. "You can't go to war because of me. The pack follows strength." His hand tightened on her thigh. "And I am showing them that nothing, not politics, not tradition, not even the threat of war, will make me abandon my mate. But if you lose, I won't." He turned to face her fully, his empty eyes somehow seeing straight into her soul. "You don't understand yet, little flame. Before you, I was slowly dying. The curse was spreading. Soon it wouldn't have just been my sight. It would have been my other senses, my strength, my wolf itself. The healers gave me 2 more years at most." Maria's breath caught. "You never said." "Because it didn't matter. I was prepared to die fighting, to give everything for this pack." His hand came up to cup her face. "And then you spilled wine on an altar, and suddenly I had a reason to live. You think I'm going to let politics or wounded pride take that away?" Tears burned in Maria's eyes. "I'm not worth a war. You're worth 1,000 wars." He leaned in until his forehead touched hers. "Let me protect you. Let me prove to them that you belong here." Before Maria could respond, a commotion erupted near the feast hall entrance. Wolves scrambled backward, weapons drawn, as a figure staggered through the doorway. It was one of the outer territory guards, his armor torn and bloodied. He collapsed to his knees, gasping. "Alpha," he wheezed. "Attack! The northern border, wolves in silver armor." Sean was on his feet instantly, his predator's focus snapping to the injured guard. "How many?" 50. Maybe more. The guard coughed, blood flecking his lips. They're burning the outlying farms, killing anyone who resists. They said they're coming for the false Luna. The feast hall exploded into chaos. Warriors rushed for weapons. Elders shouted conflicting orders. Fear rippled through the crowd like wildfire. But Maria heard only one thing. They're coming for the false Luna. This was her fault. All of it. She stood, Sean's cloak falling away, and the golden light that had been dormant beneath her skin suddenly blazed to life. Her eyes burned gold. Her skin seemed to glow from within. And when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of divine authority. Enough. Silence fell instantly. Maria descended from the high table, the power radiating off her in visible waves. She'd spent her whole life being small, being invisible, being nothing. But the flame had awakened something in her blood, something ancient and powerful and done hiding. You want to know if I'm worthy to be Luna? Her gaze swept across the assembled wolves. You want proof that I'm not just some servant girl who got lucky? She turned to Sean. His expression was fierce pride mixed with concern. Let me fight with you, Maria said. Let me prove that I can protect this pack as fiercely as you do. Absolutely not. Sean's refusal was immediate. You have power, but you've never been trained in combat. You'd be slaughtered. Then train me. Now. She stepped closer, her golden eyes meeting his. The Sun Priestesses weren't just healers and diplomats. They were warriors. The flame didn't choose me to stand behind you. It chose me to stand beside you. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some skeptical. Some intrigued. Elder Rhiannon's cackle cut through the tension. The girl has fire in her blood now. Literally. She thumped her staff. I say let her try. If she fails, she'll learn humility. If she succeeds, the old woman's smile was sharp. Well, that would be something to see. Sean's jaw clenched. Maria could feel the war raging inside him. The alpha who wanted to protect her at all costs versus the leader who knew his pack needed to see her as strong, not fragile. Finally, he gave a curt nod. Elder Garrett. Sean's voice was pure command. Clear the center of the hall. My Luna needs a demonstration. 10 minutes later, Maria stood in the cleared space wearing borrowed leather armor that hung loose on her smaller frame. Her hands trembled as she gripped a practiced sword. Wood, not steel, but still heavy and awkward in her unpracticed grip. Across from her stood Elder Garrett himself, the master of warriors. He'd agreed to the demonstration with obvious reluctance. I'll go easy on you, girl, Garrett said, not unkindly. Just show them you're not completely helpless. That's all. Maria lunged. She didn't plan it, didn't think. The golden flame inside her simply moved, and her body followed. The wooden sword became an extension of her arm, guided by instinct older than memory. Garrett barely got his own blade up in time to block. His eyes widened in shock. What in the? Maria spun, her movements fluid and deadly. She'd never held a sword before in her life, but the flame knew. The blood of Sun Priestesses remembered centuries of training, of battles fought and won. She struck 3 more times in rapid succession, each blow forcing Garrett back a step. The elder warrior's expression transformed from shock to genuine effort as he realized this wasn't going to be the easy demonstration he'd expected. The crowd watched in stunned silence. Metal rang against wood as their practiced blades met again and again. Maria could feel Garrett's strength behind each strike. He was holding back, yes, but not by much anymore. And she was matching him. No, she was winning. The flame inside her blazed brighter, feeding her movements, sharpening her instincts. She saw Garrett's next attack before he made it, ducked under his swing, and swept his legs out from under him with a move she'd never learned but somehow knew. The elder warrior crashed to the floor. Maria's wooden blade pressed against his throat. The feast hall was dead silent. Then someone started clapping. Slowly at first, then building as more wolves joined in. Not everyone. Some nobles still looked furious, some elders concerned. But enough. Enough to matter. Maria lowered her sword and offered Garrett her hand. The old warrior stared at it for a moment, then laughed, a genuine, delighted sound, and took it. Sun Priestess warrior blood, he muttered as she helped him up. I'll be damned. The legends were true. Maria turned to find Sean. He stood at the edge of the cleared space, his expression a mixture of pride, desire, and something that looked almost like relief. Still think I should stay behind? She asked, slightly breathless. His smile was all predator. I think those silver-armored bastards are in for a very unpleasant surprise. Elder Thorne stepped forward, his earlier doubt replaced with calculated consideration. If the Luna fights beside the Alpha at the northern border, if she proves herself in actual combat, not just practice, it might be enough to silence the doubters. To prove she's not just a divine fluke, but a true warrior Luna. Other elders nodded slowly. Even some of the hostile nobles looked thoughtful. Sean moved to Maria's side, his hand coming to rest on the small of her back. We leave within the hour. 50 warriors, our fastest and strongest. His gaze swept the crowd. And anyone who still doubts my Luna's worth is welcome to challenge her directly. I promise it will be the last mistake you make. No one took him up on the offer. Chapter 10. The Sunstruck Queen. The northern border was burning. Maria crouched beside Sean on a ridge overlooking the valley where 3 farmsteads had been reduced to smoking ruins. In the firelight, she could see wolves in silver armor, at least 60 of them, not 50, prowling between the buildings, searching for survivors to kill. Beside her, Sean's growl was barely human. Cornelius sent his elite guard. This isn't a raid. It's an execution. Maria's enhanced senses picked up the scent of blood on the wind. Too much blood. Her jaw clenched. These were innocent pack members, farmers, families, children, being slaughtered because a noble woman's pride had been wounded. Because Maria existed. How do we do this? She asked quietly. Sean's tactical mind was already working. Standard pincer formation. I'll take 30 warriors and hit them from the west. Elder Garrett leads 20 from the east. We trap them in the middle, cut off their retreat. He paused. You stay with the reserve force on this ridge. Protect the wounded we'll send back. No. His head snapped toward her. Maria, you heard Elder Thorne. I need to prove myself in real combat. She met his empty gaze steadily, even knowing he couldn't see her expression. Besides, I'm the one they're here for. Let me face them. They'll kill you. They'll try. She felt the golden flames stirring beneath her skin, eager for release. But I'm done being helpless. Done letting others fight my battles. For a long moment, Sean was silent. Then he reached out and pulled her against him, his hand fisting in her hair. If you die, I'm burning the entire northern reaches. Every man, woman, and child. Do you understand? It should have sounded like madness. Instead, it sounded like a vow. Then I won't die. Maria pulled back enough to see his face. Trust me. Trust the flame. Finally, reluctantly, he nodded. You fight beside me. Not alone. Never alone. Deal. Sean raised his hand, signaling the warriors. They moved into position with practiced silence, shadows flowing down the ridge toward the burning valley. Maria drew the real sword she'd been given, not practice wood anymore, but cold steel that sang as it left the scabbard. The golden flame responded, running down the blade until it glowed like captured sunlight. The wolves in silver armor noticed too late. Sean shifted mid-run, his human form exploding into the massive gold-furred wolf that Maria had only glimpsed once before. He was enormous, bigger than any wolf she'd ever seen, with eyes that blazed like suns and teeth that could crush stone. He crashed into the enemy line like an avalanche. Maria ran beside him, the flame guiding her every movement. A silver-armored wolf lunged at her throat. She ducked, spun, and drove her glowing blade through the gap in his armor beneath his arm. He fell with a howl of pain. Another attacked from her left. She blocked his strike, felt the jar of metal on metal, then swept his legs and ended him with a quick thrust. The battle became a blur of movement and blood. The flames sang in her veins, showing her where enemies would strike before they moved, lending her strength beyond her small frame, making her faster than she had any right to be. She was a whirlwind of golden light and steel. Across the battlefield, Sean tore through the enemy with primal fury. His jaws closed around throats. His claws shredded armor. He was unstoppable, magnificent, terrifying. And he kept glancing back to make sure she was still alive. The tide turned when Elder Garrett's force hit the enemy from the east. Trapped between three forces, the silver-armored wolves began to break. Some tried to flee. Most didn't make it. But their commander, a massive gray wolf with scars crisscrossing his muzzle, locked eyes on Maria and charged. He was bigger, stronger, more experienced. This wasn't a practice bout. This was death coming for her. Maria planted her feet and raised her sword. The commander shifted mid-leap, becoming human again, so he could use the silver battle-axe strapped to his back. The weapon sang through the air, aimed to split her skull. The golden flame exploded. Light erupted from Maria's body in a wave that sent wolves stumbling backward, shielding their eyes. The axe struck her blade and shattered. Silver shards rained down as the holy fire consumed the corrupted metal. The commander's eyes went wide with terror. "Impossible," he breathed. "You're just a Luna," Maria finished. Her sword, blazing like a star, pressed against his throat. "I am Luna of the Moonshadow Pack, and you attacked my people." Around them, the battle had stopped. Everyone, friend and enemy alike, stared at the small woman in ill-fitting armor who glowed like the sun itself. "Yield," Maria commanded, "or burn." The commander looked into her golden eyes and saw his death. He dropped to his knees, head bowed. "We yield." One by one, the surviving silver-armored wolves followed suit. The battle was over. The journey back to the cathedral took most of the night. They brought the surrendered enemies as prisoners, along with the bodies of the 8 Moonshadow warriors who'd fallen. The victory was decisive, but not without cost. Maria rode beside Sean, who'd shifted back to human form and wore only torn leather pants. His golden eyes hadn't left her since the battle ended. "That thing you did," he said quietly. "The explosion of light. Was that?" "I don't know." Maria stared at her hands, which still tingled with residual power. "It just happened, like the flame knew I needed it. The legends said the sun priestesses could call down divine fire in battle, that they could burn armies with a thought." His hand found hers, rough palm against her smaller one. "I think you're just beginning to understand what you are." What she was. A month ago, she'd been a clumsy servant girl hoping to survive another day. Now she was, what? A Luna? A warrior? A conduit for ancient power? "I'm still me," she said softly. "I'm still the girl who spilled wine and tripped over her own feet." "No." Sean lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her scarred knuckles. "You're the woman who faced an army and won, who stood beside her alpha in battle and proved herself worthy." His smile was fierce. "You're mine, and the pack knows it now." As they crested the final hill and the cathedral came into view, Maria saw the crowd gathered outside its doors. Hundreds of wolves, holding torches, waiting. Her stomach clenched. Were they here to celebrate? Or to protest? But as the warriors approached, the crowd dropped to their knees. Every single one. Elder Rhiannon stood at the front, leaning on her staff, her ancient face split by a wide smile. "Welcome home, Luna Maria, sunstruck queen of the Moonshadow Pack." Maria's breath caught. Sunstruck queen. Not servant. Not half-breed. Not clumsy. Queen. Sean dismounted and lifted her down from her horse. Then, in front of everyone, shrugged out of his massive fur cloak and draped it over her shoulders once more. "This is your Luna," he announced, his voice carrying to every wolf present. "She has been chosen by the flame, blessed by the goddess, and proven in battle. Anyone who questions her worth questions the gods themselves." This time, the response was unanimous. "Hail Luna Maria, sunstruck queen." The chant echoed off stone, growing louder and louder until it felt like the earth itself was shaking. Maria looked up at Sean, overwhelmed. He smiled down at her, not the cold, controlled expression of an alpha, but something warm and genuine and entirely for her. "Told you," he murmured. "Worth 1,000 wars." Then he kissed her, claiming her mouth in front of their entire pack. Maria rose on her toes and kissed him back, pouring everything she felt, gratitude, wonder, desire, belonging, into that single connection. When they finally broke apart, the crowd was cheering. Elder Rhiannon thumped her staff. "Now then, let's have a proper Luna ceremony. With less attempted murder this time, preferably." Laughter rippled through the crowd. As Sean led Maria into the cathedral, into her new home, her new life, she glanced back one final time at the faces lit by torchlight. Some still looked uncertain, some wary, but most looked hopeful. And that was enough. She'd gone from invisible servant to sunstruck queen in 3 days. She'd spilled wine on an altar and ignited a golden flame that changed everything. She'd found her power. She'd found her mate. She'd found herself. And this was only the beginning. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments.